Here with me, the Washington Post reporter behind that piece, Isaac Arnsdorf. Also with us, Eugene Daniels, MS Now senior Washington correspondent and co-host of The Weekend on MS Now. Isaac, some amazing reporting here. Tell us more about this draft and who's behind it.
So to be clear, this is not a White House draft. This is not an official White House document. This is something that some lawyers who have worked with Trump in the past on these election issues and have had success turning those into official actions are trying to get in front of him to encourage him. You know, Trump himself has said, if Congress doesn't pass universal voter ID and ban mail ballots, I want to do it anyway with an executive order. And I'm looking at some legal arguments that have never been tried before. So these are some of the legal arguments that they're trying to get to him, that even though they acknowledge the Constitution does not give the president any role over election rules and regulations, that if they declare a national emergency based on allegations of foreign interference, then he can start exercising powers he wouldn't otherwise have.
So I just want to be clear about this because the president was just gaggling with reporters as he was getting on Marine One from the White House. And our reporter, who was actually in that gaggle, Laura Barone Lopez, said he was asked specifically about that. He says he hasn't heard anything about it. He's not aware of it. So that actually conforms with what you're hearing. They're waiting to get this together to put in front of him. Would that be a fair way to put it?
They say they're coordinating with some people in the White House.
Okay.
Clearly, there are other people in the White House who do not think that this is a good idea, who think it's the last thing that they should be talking about in an election year. But the president also has in the White House working for him Kurt Olson, who was one of the lawyers advising him in the lead up to January 6th.
So this would not be out of the realm of possibility for the president to take something, again, from what might have been considered a fringe figure or group and turn it into action. How concerning is this, and what are you hearing from Democrats?
It's really concerning because, to Isaac's point about it not being a White House document, the president may or may not have seen it at this point, but it reinforces an idea that is already deeply embedded in his psyche. And when that is the case with Donald Trump, he wants to move forward. So he may not have heard about this, but now after Laura asked him about it, he might start asking his staff to see this document. And when you talk to Democrats, what they're saying is they're ready to fight. They're ready to do this on the state level, the local levels, because that is where elections in this country are held, but also federal Democrats who are going to be talking behind the scenes to their Republican colleagues, making sure they go talk to the president, tell him to calm down. I don't know that that's going to work. So much of this is about voter ID, right? And if this president, if Republicans were serious about voter ID in this country, having a federal voter ID, they would put some money behind it. They would figure out how to make sure that people had access to it. They would make it easier for folks to get it. And that is not the case that's happening right now.
So it's interesting, Isaac, the pushback on this is really about access, right? Who is going to be able to vote in this country, but secondarily, whose vote is going to be legitimately counted? What could this mean to voters if it actually came to pass?
Well, the order, an early draft that I saw does things like require, or suggests it would do things like require everyone to re-register, showing proof of citizenship, and then require all...
And not just a driver's license as a proof of citizenship,
right? Like a passport, which a majority of eligible voter or actually registered voters currently don't have an unexpired passport with their current legal name, according to surveys. So it would require everyone to re-register and then only vote with hand-marked paper ballots that are then hand-counted. So it would change the way that voting is conducted everywhere. But that would inevitably get challenged in court, as you're hearing from Democrats and the groups that have challenged Trump's past executive orders on elections, like one last year.
It could make hanging chads from 2000 look like child's play. Eugene, the president made it clear that he wants the voter ID bill that's known as the SAVE Act to pass Congress. Mark Novickov argues in The Atlantic, and I found this fascinating, that all of this might backfire on the Republicans. And let me read a little bit of what he wrote. For decades, the politics of voter ID battles were based on a simple premise. The voters most likely to be screened out by such restrictions were probably Democrats. In 2024, however, that fact stopped being true. Trump beat Kamala Harris among voters who didn't regularly participate in elections. In the low turnout off-cycle elections that have happened since then, Democrats have overperformed dramatically, suggesting that their advantage with the most educated, plugged-in voters remains strong. Voters who may have, for example, an active passport. Voters who may have the ability to make sure that they have any kind of identity. So could moves like Trump is actually promoting, and let's put aside, and I don't mean to be this flippant, put aside the fact that people would be denied the right to vote, but could it backfire on Republicans? Because Ted Lieu suggested that to me an hour ago.
Yeah, Susie Wiles, the current chief of staff and one of the co-campaign managers of Trump 2024, said that the key thing that they had to work on was making sure that people that voted, that don't typically vote for Republicans, should be Republican voters. And that was something Donald Trump was going to work on, this White House was going to work on, that Republicans were going to work on. Things like this prove that they are missing the point, that when you are trying to open the space to the kinds of people that are voting for you, that you're going to have to get some people who don't have a passport, that they're going to be people who are black and brown. He's made inroads with both of those groups. Younger people who maybe they never have traveled. Maybe they don't feel the need to travel to another country. Or traditional married women who have their name somewhere on their ID that has their married name, but then their passport may say something different because they had it before they got married. So,
also, how many people have a copy of their birth certificate? Because I had to go get one a few years ago, and the line was incredible for people getting it. So
it's all of that, and I think it shows that Republicans continue to misunderstand the electorate and what's happening in this country, which is that there are changes happening, and if they were serious about cementing their stance with voters who don't typically vote, black and brown people, young people, and don't vote for Republicans, then they would be doing something completely different, and this would not be it.